Hello everyone. For those of you who are new here, welcome. If you don't mind, please remember to subscribe if you like the story, so you don't miss any future episodes. I want to say this clearly before anything else. Nothing in that apartment ever tried to hurt me. That is the part I keep coming back to. Nothing chased me. Nothing screamed. Nothing reached out of the dark with intent. If anything, it was the opposite. It was gentle. It was warm. All it ever did was show me a version of my building where someone left the light on for me, and I think that is why I'm still not sure I made the right decision by leaving. I moved into the Greystone Arms on a Thursday in late October. I was 32 and freshly separated, and I'd been staying in a motel off the interstate for 11 days. The kind of place where the walls are thin enough to hear the ice machine cycling through the night. When I found the listing for the Greystone, I called the number before I even finished reading the description. The rent was low. I was working a data processing job I'd taken specifically because it required no personal investment. I wasn't in a position to question low rent. I was in a position to be grateful for it. The building was on Chambers Street, about 4 blocks east of the main commercial strip in a city I won't name. Midwestern, mid-sized, the kind of place that peaked in the 1970s, and has been politely declining ever since. The Greystone was a 5-story residential block built in 1953, according to the cornerstone, with that particular post-war solidity that makes everything feel load-bearing. Terrazzo floors in the lobby, brass mailboxes with combination locks, an elevator that worked but sounded like it was thinking about it. 40 units total, 8 per F-floor, and when I signed the lease, there were 12 tenants. 12 out of 40, the building wasn't abandoned. It was thinning. You could feel it in the hallways. Not emptiness exactly, but a kind of acoustic surplus. Too much space for the number of people filling it. My footsteps echoed more than they should have. Doors that should have muffled sound let it travel. The whole building had the reverb of a place remembering when it was full. My unit was 3D, 3rd floor, halfway down the east corridor. 1 bedroom, a narrow kitchen with a gas stove from a decade I couldn't identify. A bathroom with penny tile and a shower head that took 3 full minutes to get warm. The radiator worked well. That was the first thing I checked. It clicked and ticked and settled into its rhythm every evening around 6. And I am not exaggerating when I say it was the closest thing to company I had for the first 2 weeks. I liked it. I need to be honest about that. I liked the apartment. Not in the way you like a place that impresses you, but in the way you like a place that asks nothing of you. It was clean. It was quiet. The windows faced east and caught the morning light through old glass that made everything look slightly amber. I set up my bed, a second-hand lamp, a folding table, and a chair. I brought one thing from before, a wool blanket my mother had given us as a housewarming gift. It still smelled faintly like the old apartment. I kept it folded at the foot of the bed and didn't think about why. The rest was enough. For where I was in my life, it was more than enough. The hallway, though, that is what I need to describe. Every floor of the Greystone had the same layout. The elevator opened to a small landing, and from there, a single corridor ran the full length of the building, east to west. 4 apartments on each side, 8 total. The corridor was long, maybe 80 feet, and lit by 4 overhead fixtures, spaced evenly along the ceiling. The floor was the same terrazzo as the lobby, a pale green-gray that held the cold. The walls were plaster, painted a color that had probably started as cream and aged into something closer to bone. At the far end of the corridor, past 3H, the hallway terminated in a wall, and bolted to that wall, floor to almost ceiling, was a mirror. It was old, brass, framed, heavy, with a slight convex curve that made the hallway look longer than it was when you faced it straight on. The glass had that faint amber tint that old mirrors get, not enough to distort, just enough to make everything reflected in it look warmer than it actually was. It was bolted to the wall with 4 brass fixtures, the kind with decorative rosettes, and the plaster around them was unpainted, as if the mirror had been there since before the last time anyone bothered with the walls. It wasn't unusual. Old buildings have mirrors in hallways. It is a design trick, makes tight spaces feel wider, gives depth to corridors. I noticed it the way you notice a light fixture. It was there. It was part of the building. I met Dale on my second day. He was the building superintendent. Had been for 22 years, he told me, which he said with neither pride nor complaint. He was in his 60s, heavy-set, with reading glasses on a cord around his neck and a way of looking at you like he was deciding how much to say. He came by to make sure the radiator was cycling properly and to drop off a spare mailbox key. As he was leaving, standing in the doorway with one hand on the frame, he said it. One thing. After 1 o'clock at night, just stay in your apartment. I waited for the rest of it. Some explanation, some reason. He didn't offer one. The hallway, I said. The hallway, if you need the bathroom, go before one. If you want water, keep a glass by the bed. He adjusted his glasses. Everyone in the building follows it. Not a rule I made up, just how it has always been. I asked why. He looked at me the way someone looks at you when the honest answer would take longer than they're willing to stand in a doorway. The mirror, he said. He paused, then added, almost as an afterthought, it is original. Was here before the conversion. Building used to be a residential hotel, weekly boarders, transient workers. Mirror was in the lobby then. They moved it upstairs in '53, when they cut the units. Don't know why they didn't just take it out. Then he nodded once, said goodnight, and pulled the door shut. I followed the rule, not because I believed there was a reason, but because I didn't have a reason not to. My life had a rhythm to it by then, a small, careful rhythm that I protected, because it was all I had. I went to work at 8. I came home at 5:30. I made dinner. Usually pasta, sometimes eggs. I read, or I didn't. I turned the lamp off at 11, sometimes midnight. I kept a glass of water on the floor beside the bed. I did not walk the hallway after 1. It was easy to follow because there was nothing to violate it for. I had nowhere to be at 1 in the morning. I had no one to visit. The building was quiet by 10 most nights, genuinely quiet, the kind of quiet that has texture, where you can hear the elevator settling and the pipes adjusting and, faintly, the wind pressing against the windows at the end of the hall. I'll be honest, I thought about the mirror, not obsessively, not fearfully. I thought about it the way you think about any unexplained instruction, with a low, idle curiosity that sits at the back of your mind and occasionally surfaces, when you are lying in the dark with nothing else to think about. What could a mirror do after 1 in the morning that it doesn't do at noon? I didn't have an answer. I didn't look for one. 3 weeks in, I broke the rule. It wasn't dramatic. I didn't do it on purpose, or out of defiance, or because I'd been building toward it. I woke up at 1:15 with a dry throat and realized I'd forgotten to fill my water glass. That is it. That is the whole reason. A dry throat and a lapse in routine. I got up, opened my door, and walked down the hallway to the water fountain near the elevator. The hallway was dim. 2 of the 4 overhead lights were on their night setting, which meant they gave off about half their usual output. The terrazzo was cold under my bare feet. I filled my glass, drank half of it standing there, filled it again, and turned back. The mirror was at the other end of the corridor, 80 feet away. I was facing it. I could see myself, a dark shape in a dim hallway, holding a glass of water. Normal, completely normal, except the hallway in the mirror looked warmer. I don't mean the light was different, or the tint of the old glass was playing tricks. I mean the hallway the mirror was showing me felt, and I know how that sounds, occupied, like the air in it was warmer. Like there was a density to it that the actual hallway I was standing in didn't have. The mirror version of the corridor looked the way a room looks when someone has been in it recently. Not a presence, an after effect, the thermal residue of human activity. I walked back to my apartment. I stood at the doorway for a moment, looking toward the mirror from maybe 30 feet away. The reflection was just my hallway, just me, but the warmth. That sense of recent habitation lingered at the edges, like catching a scent of cooking from a window you can't identify. I went to bed. I told myself the old glass does things with light at certain angles. I told myself I was tired. Both of those things were true, and neither of them was the reason I lay awake for another 40 minutes. 4 days later, I did it again. Deliberately this time, though I didn't fully admit that to myself. I stayed up past 1. Not hard. I wasn't sleeping well anyway. And at about 10 after, I stepped into the hallway with my glass, as if I were just getting water. I walked to the fountain. I filled the glass. I turned around and faced the mirror. It was there again, the warmth, but this time there was more. In the reflection, on the wall outside apartment, 3F, 2 doors down from mine, A unit I knew was empty. There was a coat hanging on a hook, a brown wool coat, heavy, the kind with wooden toggle buttons. It was not there in the actual hallway. I looked to my right, directly at the wall outside 3F bare plaster. Bone-colored paint, no hook, no coat. In the mirror, the coat hung as if it had always been there, as if someone had just come home and put it up. I told myself it was pareidolia, the brass frame catching hallway light at an angle, my brain filling in shapes the way it fills in faces and wallpaper. The building was old glass warps. I said that to myself 3 times walking back, and it almost worked. Except pareidolia doesn't smell like wool. The coat had a smell. Faint, warm, damp. The way wool smells when someone's just come in from the cold. I could not explain that. I did not try. I did not stop. I did not get closer to the mirror. But I looked at it the whole way, and just before I turned into my doorway, I saw something else in the reflection, a thin line of warm light under the door of 3G. The apartment at the end of the hall, directly in front of the mirror, the apartment that had been empty, Dale told me, for at least 6 years. In the real hallway, the door of 3G was dark, no light, no warmth. Just a door with a deadbolt and a number plate that had gone slightly green with oxidation. In the mirror, someone was home. I want to be careful about how I describe what happened next, because the thing that made it so effective, the thing that made it work on me, was how unfrightening it was. If the mirror had shown me something terrible, I would have stopped looking. If there had been blood, or a figure standing wrong, or my reflection doing something I wasn't doing, any of the things you'd expect, I would have walked away and called it a building with a strange piece of glass and moved on. But it didn't show me anything terrible. It showed me something I wanted. Over the next 2 weeks, I walked the hallway after 1 o'clock 6 more times. Each time, the mirror showed me more, not suddenly, gradually, the way details accumulate in a place you visit often. The code outside 3F was always there. The light under 3G was always on, but now there were other things. A pair of shoes outside 3B, men's work boots, worn soft at the heel, set neatly beside the door, the way someone does when they don't want to track dirt inside. A doormat outside 3A that wasn't there during the day, woven, faded, the kind you'd find at a hardware store in 1978. The overhead lights in the mirror were all working, all 4 at full brightness, whereas in my actual hallway the second fixture had been stuck on its dim setting since I moved in. The hallway in the mirror was the same hallway, same dimensions, same terrazzo, same plaster walls. But it was a version of the hallway where every apartment was occupied, where people came home, hung their coats, took off their shoes, left their lights on, where the building was being used the way it was designed to be used, fully, warmly, with the unconscious ease of people who live somewhere and don't think about it. I started noticing sounds, not clearly, not through the glass, nothing like that. More like suggestions of sound, the faintest impression of a radio, the ghost of a kettle whistling, the rhythmic, barely, their cadence of someone walking in the apartment above the reflected hallway. Sounds that existed at the threshold of imagination and perception, close enough to either that I couldn't tell which, and smells. Once, standing about 15 feet from the mirror at 20 to 2 in the morning, I caught the unmistakable scent of coffee. Fresh, real, strong enough to place. Someone had just brewed a pot. I turned around. My hallway was empty, cold, and smelled like old plaster and radiator dust. I turned back to the mirror. The coffee smell was still there, faintly, like a window open to a warm kitchen I couldn't see. I'll tell you what I did not feel during any of this, afraid. I felt curious. I felt interested. I felt, and this is the word I keep returning to, I felt invited. I talked to Dale again about 2 weeks after I started looking. I didn't tell him what I'd seen. I asked about the building's history instead. Sideways questions, the kind you ask when you don't want someone to know what you are really asking. He told me the Greystone had been full for most of its life. 40 units, 40 tenants, sometimes more, families, couples, the occasional person doubling up in a 1-bedroom because the rent was right and the location was decent. The building had a waiting list into the early 90s. People stayed for years, decades. There were tenants who moved in during the Kennedy administration and were still there when Dale started in 2002. What happened? I asked. Dale was replacing a light switch in the lobby. He didn't look up. People leave, he said. Buildings get old. neighborhood changes. 12 tenants out of 40 is a lot of leaving. He set down his screwdriver. He looked at me over his glasses, not suspicious exactly. More like someone gauging whether a conversation is worth the energy it'll cost. Some of them left fast, he said. Didn't give notice, didn't forward their mail, just gone. I checked the units and their stuff would still be there. Clothes in the closet, food in the fridge, like they stepped out and didn't come back. How many? Over 22 years. He picked the screwdriver back up. 7, maybe 8. But once I noticed, he didn't say anything else about it. I didn't push. But before I left, he said one more thing, almost to himself. Building remembers better than the people do. That is the thing about old places. The building doesn't forget anyone who lived here. It just keeps them. I knew what he meant. I didn't want to admit I knew what he meant, but I did. But before I tell you about the nights that followed, I need to tell you about a Saturday afternoon. It was about 3 o'clock, broad daylight. I was carrying laundry down the hallway, a basket under one arm, detergent balanced on top. I passed the mirror the way I'd passed it 100 times during the day, without thinking, without looking, without expecting anything. The mirror during the day was just a mirror. I'd confirmed that dozens of times. My reflection, the hallway, the terrazzo, normal. Except this time, for 1 second, the length of a blink, the length of a footstep. I saw a hook on the wall outside 3F, not the coat, just the hook. A small brass hook screwed into the plaster, catching the overhead light. I stopped. I looked at the actual wall, bare. I looked back at the mirror, bare, the hook was gone. Both versions matched again, perfectly ordinary, as if I'd imagined it. But I hadn't imagined it, and what it meant frightened me more than anything I'd seen at night, because it meant the boundary wasn't fixed. It was softening, and my looking was what was softening it. I carried my laundry to the basement, and I did not look at the mirror on the way back. But I thought about it the whole time. I thought about the fact that the daytime had been safe, and now it wasn't, or at least it wasn't guaranteed, and I thought about whose attention had changed that. By then, I had started recognizing people in the mirror at night, not faces. I was never close enough for faces, and the reflected hallway had a quality of light that softened details the way candlelight does. But I recognized patterns, routines, the specific, repeatable habits that make a person identifiable even at a distance. There was a woman in 3C, or in the reflection of 3C, who came to her door every night at about 1:20. She opened it, looked both ways down the hallway, and closed it again. A check. The kind of thing you do before going to bed if you live alone and want to make sure the hallway is empty and the building is settled. She wore a bathrobe, dark, maybe navy, and her hair was up. I saw her do this 4 times across 2 weeks, always within the same 5-minute window, always with the same sequence. Open, look left, look right, close. There was a man on the other side of the hall, 3E or 3F. I was never sure, who walked to the water fountain and back, just like I did. Same fountain, same route. He was tall, slightly stooped, and moved slowly, the way people do when they've lived in a building long enough that they don't need to think about where things are. I heard his footsteps in the mirror, or I thought I did. That soft terrazzo shuffle. And there was someone in 3G, the apartment at the end, closest to the mirror. I never saw them come to the door, but the light was always on. And sometimes, rarely, and always at the very edge of what I could perceive. I caught the shadow of movement through the gap at the bottom of the reflected door. Someone walking past it, inside, someone at home. The building in the mirror was not haunted. I need to say that clearly because it is the thing most people would assume, and it is wrong. There were no ghostly figures, no translucent shapes, no horror, movie distortions. The people in the mirror looked exactly like people. They moved like people. They did the small, unremarkable things that people do in the middle of the night when no one is watching. Checking doors, getting water, adjusting thermostats, standing in hallways in their socks. They looked comfortable. They looked like they belonged there. They looked like residents. And I looked like a visitor. The night before I first stood in the hallway on purpose, I came home from work and said, "Hello" to the apartment. Out loud. Not as a joke. I just wanted to hear a voice say something in that room, even if it was mine. The apartment didn't answer, obviously, but the echo lasted longer than it should have in a room that small. and I stood there listening to it fade, and I thought, this is what it sounds like when a word has nowhere to land. I pulled the wool blanket off the foot of the bed and sat with it on the folding chair and ate pasta, and the blanket smelled less like the old apartment than it had the week before. That is when I knew I was losing the last of it. The mirror offered the opposite of that fading. The mirror offered evidence of habitation, warmth, company, not mine, not directed at me, not aware of me, but present, close enough to feel, close enough that standing in the hallway at 1:30 in the morning, looking at the reflected version of my building, I felt less alone than I did anywhere else. I started spending more time there, not all at once. The first time, I stood for 5 minutes, then 10. Then I stopped setting limits. I bring my glass of water and lean against the wall outside my apartment and look at the mirror and watch the building be full. I'd watch the woman in 3C do her check. I'd watch the man with the shuffle walk his route. I'd see the light in 3G shift as someone inside moved from one room to another. I'd smell the coffee. I'd hear the faintest suggestion of a radio, something old, something with static and warmth, like a station that doesn't exist anymore, playing music that no one listens to. I was not frightened. I was grateful. And my own apartment, by contrast, started feeling like less. I don't mean it changed. The dimensions were the same. The radiator still clicked, the lamp still worked, but it felt thin, temporary, the way a motel room feels. No matter how many nights you sleep in it, my apartment was a place I occupied. The building in the mirror was a place people lived. I started noticing that I was happier in the hallway than in my unit. I started noticing that I lingered, that I found reasons to step out after one, a glass of water, a trip to the trash room, a walk to the stairwell for air. And every time, I'd end up standing in the corridor, facing the mirror, watching the warm version of the building go about its night. I met Mrs. Asher in the elevator on a Tuesday morning. She lived in 5B, had lived there for 31 years, she told me, which she offered with a matter, a fact clarity of someone who has stopped being impressed by duration. She was in her 70s, thin, with a wool coat and a canvas grocery bag, and the kind of voice that carries without effort. I asked her about the building. She told me it used to be wonderful, full, alive. A place where you knew your neighbors' schedules by the sounds through the walls and the smells from their kitchens. She told me about the Kowalskis in 4A, who played polka records on Sunday mornings, about Mr. Devereaux in 2F, who repaired clocks and left his door open so you could hear them chime at noon, about the woman in 3G, Helen something, I can never remember the last name, who made coffee at midnight and left her light on all night because she said the dark made the building feel smaller than it was. What happened to her? I asked. Helen. Mrs. Asher shifted her grocery bag. She was one of the hallway ones, she said, as if that phrase should mean something to me. I waited. Every few years we'd lose someone from the middle floors, usually someone who kept late hours. Dale or whoever was super at the time would find them in the hallway in the morning, standing, facing that mirror. Sometimes they'd snap out of it, confused, cold, not sure how long they'd been there. Sometimes they'd be closer, right up to the glass, hands on it. She paused, and a few times, Dale didn't find anyone at all. The apartment would just be empty, belongings still there, lease still active, person gone. She looked at me the way Dale had looked at me, that measuring look, that how much do I say look. Helen made coffee at midnight, Mrs. Asher said. 3G, end of the hall. You could smell it from the stairwell. After she was gone, after her apartment was empty and locked and nobody was in it, you could still smell her coffee in the hallway after 1 in the morning, but only in the mirror side. Only if you were looking. I don't go out there late enough to check anymore. She stepped out of the elevator. Follow Dale's rule, she said. The building's nice. It is nice enough without all that. I should have stopped. I know that. I should have heard what she said, and what Dale said, and what the empty building itself was saying, quietly through vacancy and silence, and the residue of missing tenants. And I should have stopped walking the hallway at night. But here's the thing I couldn't get past. It wasn't wrong. What the mirror showed, it wasn't evil or corrupted or twisted. It was the building as it had been, full, functioning, cared for. It was people living their lives, doing the same things I was doing, getting water, checking doors, existing in the middle of the night in the only place they had to exist. The mirror wasn't showing me a nightmare. It was showing me what I'd moved into the graystone hoping to find and didn't. A home that felt like a home, a building that held people, a hallway that meant something because someone else was in it. I kept looking. I kept standing. I started going out earlier, 12:50, 12:45, so I'd be in position when the shift happened, and I noticed it wasn't sudden. The mirror didn't change at 1 o'clock like a switch being thrown. It was gradual. Around 12:40, the reflection started to warm. By 12:55, the first details appeared. The coat, the doormat, the light under 3G. By 1:10, it was fully there. A populated hallway, the inhabited building, as if the mirror needed a few minutes to remember, the way a person needs a few minutes to recall a dream after waking. One night, early November by then, cold enough that the windows in the stairwell had fog on the inside. I walked closer to the mirror than I ever had before. I'd been staying back, 15 feet, 20, maintaining a distance I'd never consciously established, but also never broken. That night, I walked to within 5 feet. The reflection was vivid. The hallway in the mirror was bright, warm, all 4 lights at full. The coat outside 3F had a scarf draped over it, red, hand-knitted, with a frayed end. The work boots outside 3B had a thin crust of dried mud on the soles. The doormat outside 3 said welcome in faded block letters. Behind me in the reflection, down the hall toward the elevator, I could see a light on in 3A, a warm amber rectangle through the transom window above the door. In the real hallway, behind me, the transom was dark. And then I saw something in the mirror I had not seen before. Through the reflected door of 3G, Helen's apartment, the one closest to the mirror, I could see past the gap at the bottom, not just shadow and movement this time. Light, warm, steady, lamp-colored light, and on the floor, just inside the door, a pair of slippers, and beyond them, at the very limit of the angle, the edge of a kitchen table set, a mug on it, steaming, a plate, a napkin folded once, a table set for 2. I stood there looking at that table for a long time, 2 settings, 2 chairs, one occupied by shadow and angle, the other empty, pulled out, waiting, and I understood, not intellectually, not through evidence, but in the deep and wordless way you understand, that a hand extended toward you is an invitation that the empty chair was for me. I didn't move closer. I didn't touch the glass. I stood there with my water glass, going warm in my hand, and I looked at that chair and I felt something I had not felt since before the separation, before the motel, before the data processing job and the folding table, and the 11 days of industrial lavender. I felt expected. Not wanted exactly. The mirror didn't want. It didn't have desire or intent that I could identify, but it expected me. The way a table set for 2 expects someone to sit down, the way a coat hook with 1 coat on it expects a second, the way a building with 40 apartments and 12 tenants expects the other 28 to come home. The building hadn't lost its tenants. It was keeping them, and it was patient enough to wait for the rest. I went back to my apartment. I sat on the edge of my bed and I looked at my lamp, my folding table, my 1 chair, my glass of water, my bare walls and cold window and the radiator, clicking through its cycle the way it did every night, constant and mechanical and completely indifferent to whether I was there to hear it. The mirror's hallway had coffee and warm light and someone in the next room and a chair pulled out for me. I understood the rule then, not the why of it, not the mechanism, not the physics or metaphysics or whatever governed what the mirror did after 1 a.m. I understood the function. The rule wasn't a warning about something dangerous. It was a boundary against something comforting. Dale didn't tell me to stay out of the hallway because the mirror would hurt me. He told me to stay out because it would offer me something I wasn't strong enough to refuse. Dale found me in the hallway 3 nights later. It was 2:40 in the morning. I was sitting on the terrazzo floor about 6 feet from the mirror, my back against the wall, my water glass empty beside me. I don't know how long I'd been there, an hour, maybe more. The reflected hallway was vivid, more vivid than it had ever been. I could hear the radio in one of the reflected apartments clearly now, not a suggestion, but a sound, an old station, a song I almost recognized. Something with strings and a woman's voice, playing quietly the way music plays when it is meant for 1 person in a kitchen late at night. Dale sat down beside me. He didn't say anything for a while. We sat there together on the cold floor, and I think he was looking at the mirror too, though I couldn't tell if he saw what I saw. "How long have you been coming out here?" he asked. "A few weeks," he nodded, like he knew. "I've pulled 6 people back from that glass," he said. "Over 22 years. 6 people I got to in time. Found them standing right up against it. Palms flat, foreheads touching. One woman was whispering. Couldn't hear what she was saying, but her breath was fogging the glass, and the fog wasn't fading the way fog should. It was staying, building up, like the glass was getting thinner." He paused. 3 more I didn't get to. 2 on this floor, 1 on 4. Their units are still locked. Their stuff is still in there. Mrs. Riddell in 3B left a pot of soup on the stove. By the time I went in, it had boiled dry and scorched the pan, but the burner was still on. She'd left her apartment in the middle of making dinner and walked to the end of the hallway, and she didn't come back. Where did she go? Dale looked at the mirror. In the reflection, the work boots outside 3B sat neatly by the door, worn soft at the heel, set with care. "She is in there," he said. "They're all in there. You can see them if you look. Helen with her coffee, Mrs. Riddell in her shoes, Mr. Paulson from 4A. He was before my time. But Mrs. Asher described him to me, and I've seen a man in the reflection of 4 who matches. Tall, stooped, does laps to the water fountain. The man with the shuffle. The one I'd been watching for weeks. Not a former tenant's ghost. A former tenant's ghost. The former tenant, still performing his nighttime routine, still getting water, still living in the building the only way the building would let him. Inside the glass, inside the warmth, inside the version that never emptied out. It doesn't take them by force, Dale said. That is the thing people don't understand. They go willingly, every single one. They stand there, and they look at what is in the mirror, and they choose it because what is in the mirror is better. It is warmer. It is fuller. It is the building the way it was when it was alive, and for someone who is lonely enough, that is not a threat. That is an answer. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said something that I think about more than anything else, he told me. It is not a recording. The people in there aren't replaying. They're choosing. Every night, they choose to check the lock, to get the water, to make the coffee. That is what makes it permanent. They're not trapped. They're home. He rubbed his face. That is worse. He stood up slowly, knees cracking. He offered me a hand. You are not there yet, he said. You are still sitting. The ones I lose are the ones who stand. Once they're on their feet and facing it, it is harder to turn around. Once they touch the glass, I don't think they can. I took his hand. I stood up. I looked at the mirror one more time. The coat, the boots, the light, the warm hallway full of people who had chosen this, who had traded their cold and empty real apartments for a reflected version that gave them what they needed. And I went back to 3D and closed the door. I moved out 4 days later. I didn't give 30 days notice. I paid the penalty, packed my car, and left the key in Dale's mailbox with a note that said thank you, nothing else. I found another apartment, a newer building, a complex off the bypass. One of those places with white walls and gray carpet and recessed lighting and absolutely no character whatsoever. No terrazzo, no brass, no history, no mirror. I thought it would be over. It was not over. The first night in the new apartment, I woke at 1:10, not from a nightmare, not from a sound. Just woke, the way you do when your body has learned a schedule you didn't set. I lay there in the dark for a few minutes, then got up for water. The bedroom window faced the parking lot. I walked past it with my glass, and I caught my reflection. The room behind my reflection was not my room. It was furnished differently, warmer. There was a lamp on, an old lamp, amber-toned, the kind with a fabric shade, sitting on a table I did not own. The walls behind my reflected self were a color I couldn't name in the dark, but that I recognized, cream aged to bone. And far back in the reflected room, near a doorway that did not exist in my actual bedroom, there was a figure, standing still. Small, slightly hunched, holding something in both hands. A kettle. I closed the curtains. I stood in the dark with my heart going and my water glass shaking, and I told myself it was a trick of the glass, the parking lot lights, the unfamiliar room, the residual anxiety of the move. I told myself all of it, and none of it helped because I knew what I had seen. I knew who I had seen. Helen, 3G, coffee at midnight, light on all night. She had followed me. Or, no, that is not right. She hadn't followed me. The mirror hadn't followed me. I had internalized it. Weeks of looking, weeks of standing in that hallway, weeks of watching and wanting and letting the warmth of the reflected building seep into whatever part of the mind processes belonging. I had trained my perception. I had taught my eyes to see the warm version, and now they couldn't stop. The next night, I didn't open the curtains. I lay in bed and stared at the ceiling and got through until morning. The night after that, I opened them. Helen was there, further back this time, barely visible. But there, the lamp was on, the room was warm, and in the window's reflection, my new apartment, white walls, gray carpet, recessed lighting, nothing, looked thin, temporary, like a sketch of a place someone might live. The warm room behind the glass looked permanent. That was 5 months ago. I still live in the new apartment. I still go to work. I still eat, sleep, function in every measurable way. By any standard anyone could apply from the outside, I am fine. But every night after 1 in the morning, every reflective surface I pass, windows, bathroom mirrors, the microwave door, the dark screen of my phone, shows me the warm version, not of the graystone, the warm version of this apartment, this hallway, this building, furnished, occupied, lived in, full of the quiet evidence of people being home. Coats on hooks, shoes by doors, lights in kitchens, the faintest smell of coffee, the faintest sound of a radio playing something with strings. And every night in one of those reflections, there is a chair, pulled out, at a table set for 2. It does not threaten, it does not demand. It does not demand, it does not change or escalate or apply pressure. It waits, and every night I have to decide, actively, deliberately, with full awareness of what I am choosing and what I am refusing, to stay in the cold room, the real room, the room where no one is home except me and no one is coming, and the radiator clicks through its cycle for no one's benefit, and the lamp lights, nothing that matters, and the glass of water by the bed is just water, and the silence is just silence. I choose it. Every night I choose it. But I'd be lying if I said it was easy. I'd be lying if I said I didn't stand at the window sometimes and look at the warm room and think, what would it cost, really, to sit down in that chair, to drink that coffee, to let the glass get thin and step through into a place where the building is full and the hallway is warm, and someone left the light on because they knew I was coming. I don't know how long I can keep choosing the cold room. I don't know if the warm one gets more patient or less. I don't know if there is a version of this where I get strong enough that the offer stops mattering, or if the whole point is that it never stops mattering, that it just sits there, set and waiting, until one night the loneliness is a little too heavy, and the silence is a little too long, and I walk to the window and press my palms flat against the glass and let it take me somewhere warm. Dale told me 6 pulled back, 3 lost. He didn't tell me about the ones who left the building and thought they were free. Maybe he didn't know. Or maybe he knew that the knowing wouldn't help. I keep a glass of water by the bed. I keep the curtains closed. I keep the bathroom mirror covered with a towel after midnight. I bought a second towel specifically for this, which is the kind of practical adaptation that tells you everything about where my life is now. But sometimes, very late, when the apartment is so quiet that I can hear the parking lot lights buzzing through the wall, I uncover the mirror, just for a second, just to check. The warm room is always there. The lamp is always on. The chair is always empty, and it fits me perfectly. I know it does. I've never sat in it, and I know it does. That is the part I can't stop thinking about. Not the mirror, not the building, not Helen with her kettle, or Mr. Paulson with his shuffle or misses. Riedel's boots set neatly by a door that doesn't exist. The part I can't stop thinking about is that the chair is comfortable. I've never touched it. I've never been in the same room as it, and I know, the way you know your own name, the way you know which side of the bed is yours, the way you know the exact temperature of water you like. I know that if I sat in it, it would fit, and I know that if I sat in it, I would never need to get up. I leave the towel on the mirror. The radiator clicks, the lamp hums. but water in the glass is still and flat and room temperature. I choose the cold room. Tonight. If you enjoyed tonight's nightmare, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, because you never know what's waiting in the dark for you next. Sweet dreams if you can sleep.